Tom Pelissero back here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you and Tom?
Doing great, Rich. Rolling into week 7. A lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
We're counting down to the trade deadline. It's a fun time of year.
Yep. So, it's kind of funny. I shouldn't say this funny because it does mean that Justin Fields might not play. Tyson Bagent being the starter for the Chicago Bears. Are you texting someone right now? Are you reporting back to what? Tom, Tom.
There's a move. Okay,
what's the move? What is it? What is it? Now you got to share it. If you're not eyes here, Tom. What is going on?
Steelers are releasing Gunnar Olszewski, who's a great story out of Bemidji State, wide receiver, been a very productive special teamer. Wild guess, Bill Belichick will have him back in New England in about 10 seconds here. We'll see exactly how this plays out. But that's notable, though, for the Steelers because Deontay Johnson, remember, coming back from injured reserve, he was practicing this week. So by releasing Gunnar, that probably means Deontay Johnson is back. We'll see if that's this week. They certainly could use him because sounds like Pat Fryermuth definitely not playing this week and may not be playing for a little bit here, Rich.
Okay, so this is actual genuine information that has a ripple effect and thus, is required for your immediate attention despite being on live television and radio, Tom. You can multitask. It's okay.
It's tough balance.
It's okay.
We try to handle everything. By the way, what's up to my guys in the studio?
Hey, what's up, Tom? Great
Isn't
to see
this
you,
lovely?
Man.
That's my guy.
Love being here.
I know. So anyway, the fact that Justin Fields, is he going or he can't go? What do you think? Is he going Sunday? What are you hearing about?
I would be really surprised based on everything I know if he is going to go, which means that it's probably or is going to be the undrafted rookie from Shepherd, Tyson Bagent, getting his first NFL start, it's a remarkable story on Bagent because he if you look at his numbers, it's astronomical production. He thought about transferring to a Division I program last year, but decided, you know what, I'm going to finish it out here, at Shepherd. Put up big numbers, didn't get drafted, went to the Senior Bowl, but there's something about the guy as much as the player that teams really like through the course of the process. So the Bears said, okay, he's a free agent. Let's bring him in here. They weren't thinking at the time he was going to beat out P.J. Walker for the backup job. Walker would be starting for the Browns when they beat the 49ers. Bagent would be starting this week going up against whoever it is and whoever the Raiders are starting at quarterback. But here we are in a big opportunity for Tyson Bagent.
And then, if he performs well enough, Tom, it's entirely possible that we won't have to constantly mention who his dad is every time we talk about Tyson. Travis, let me get this right, 17-time arm wrestling world champion. And if I'm not mistaken, because every single time Tyson Bagent gets mentioned these days around our stomping grounds at the NFL Media Group, there's video from the Senior Bowl of you arm wrestling this individual. The question I have for you is now, how did that come about and why would you do that, Tom?
All great questions, Rich.
Thank you.
It started out because I was in an establishment in Mobile early in the week and ran into Tyson Bagent's agent who was like, oh, do you want to meet his dad? And he, of course, is the 27-time arm wrestling world champion. He started out as a lefty, which there aren't many lefties, but then he also switched to righty.
Why not?
So he won titles with both arms. It's very impressive. So
it's like Mickey
we started
Mantle
talking about it. I think Ian Rappaport actually suggested, hey, you guys should arm wrestle on TV. But we get to late in the week. It's Thursday. We're trying to spice things up on TV. And they're like, hey, is the dad there? Let's do this. So he walked down, and you'd think he'd been rehearsing the script for a month. He had the whole thing and all the smack that he was going to talk throughout all of it. I saw Kevin Clark reply to the video when it got put out there again yesterday, saying, I thought Tom was just going to get beaten. I didn't think that the guy was going to cut a wrestling promo before, during, and after beating him. But that's what it was. So funny thing, Rich,
yes.
I'll be on Game Day Morning, of course, your show on Sunday
our show,
morning.
Tom. It's our show. It's our show.
I like to think of it as your show,
okay.
But sure, bring me into the mix. So I'm planning to talk about Tyson Bagent on Sunday. So I'm going to text Travis the Beast Bagent just to check in, because we've got this very special relationship. So I text him hey, going to be talking, I'm sure it's an exciting week, going to be talking about Tyson on TV. Do you want to give me a quick call if you got a minute? 15 minutes later, my phone rings, hey, what's up? And he goes, it's your daddy calling. So he's headed there. A lot of friends and family member going to be in the house for Tyson's first start. So pretty cool moment. Dad's going to be trying to keep it together in the stand.
There it is. The great. I mean, you didn't have a shot, right? Like you didn't have.
No.
Like honestly, what is that like? Was it like hitting a wall, like a brick wall, like actually shoving your arm against a wall? Is that what it was like?
That photo there is a great representation of it, because you notice at that point I have both hands on his one hand, just trying to get something going there. It was it was something. But my concern was for about 5 minutes after, because I'm putting everything I've got into it. I don't know what I'm doing. For about 5 minutes after, I was numb from my wrist down to my elbow and thinking, this is bad. This is my microphone elbow. If I got to do the game lefty, we're going to have some real problems here. But the feeling came back.
Okay, good.
It became this viral moment, thanks in part to your friends Daniel Jeremiah and Charles Davis cackling uncontrollably in the background the whole time. You know, you would never think, though, too, when you walk away from that week, and I talked to scouts after, coaches who were like, Bagent threw it okay. But it wasn't like, wow, he blew everybody away. He had a pretty solid week. With those guys, you just never know. Are they going to get that opportunity? Is it going to line up for him? Are they going to kick around and get cut 100 times over the next 5 years? Here he is. It's week 7 of the NFL season, and a dude who is starting against fill-in-the-blank state school from West Virginia last year at this time is about to start against the Raiders on Sunday. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, against fill-in-the-blank quarterback for the Raiders. As we're talking here, Tom, any guess at all who it's going to be, and what does ail Jimmy Garoppolo, Tom?
Josh McDaniels said before practice today that they would not make a final decision until after practice. If I am reading the tea leaves right now, Rich, from everything that I have been told so far, I would guess, educated guess, but still a guess, that it's Brian Hoyer getting the start this week, which would mean Aiden O'Connell, the rookie, would end up being the backup here. It's a tough deal because O'Connell, you remember, got his last start. It was short notice, and he's put out there, thrown into the fire. He actually made some plays in that game. Also turned it over a couple of times. With Brian Hoyer last week, he played okay in relief. You can go back through. I mean, Brian Hoyer, he's a great guy. He's been around a long time. Has not had to start and win very many football games in like the last 7-8 years here. But maybe that allows the Raiders to feel like they've got a little bit more control over the situation. We all know Josh McDaniels comes from the Bill Belichick tree. You don't want to give away the football. Aiden O'Connell did that a couple of times his last time out. With regard to Jimmy Garoppolo, what I can tell you is in part what Josh McDaniels said, which is that they feel like they've ruled out the most significant. They've dodged a major bullet, as Josh put it, in terms of internal injuries. But it's a substantial enough injury that by Thursday they had already ruled out Garoppolo for this week's game. I can tell you Jimmy has been in the building this week. He's out of the hospital. We'll see exactly when he might be able to get back onto the field right now. For a Raiders team that's won, their past 2 games, it's find a way and let some of those other superstars they've got on the roster go to work.
Tom Pelissero here in his usual Friday spot on the Rich Eisen Show, my colleague from the NFL Media Group. What is your best guess on what's going to happen Monday night with McCaffrey and Debo, Trent Williams, Niners and Vikings? What do you got for me there, Tom?
So with Christian McCaffrey, they ruled out any type of rib or rib cartilage issue, according to Kyle Shanahan, which is good news. He's dealing with what the team is calling an oblique issue at this point. I've talked to people who know McCaffrey really well and say, unless there's an injury and the doctors say you cannot play, he is going to play. In other words, this is not going to be, I don't quite feel 100%. He knows he's got a chance to do something special this year. He knows that there's MVP conversation, and it's not all about individual goals either. It's also about getting this 49ers team back on track. So we'll see. It's really going to be a matter of how does he feel here in the coming days. It sounds like with Debo and Trent Williams, they're kind of in the same boat. With Trent Williams, he's played through everything. He's got an ankle sprain right now. It's not a high ankle sprain, and he's played through those before. So I'd be surprised at this point if Trent Williams doesn't go. With Debo, you just want to make sure with his physical playing style, is he able to, protect himself? Is there any risk of aggravating it? None of those guys you mentioned practiced yesterday, neither did Dre Greenlaw. So there are some things we're going to be monitoring leading up to Monday night.
What's the deal with Deshaun Watson, Tom? What's going on there?
I think, Rich, the Deshaun Watson conversation got skewed a little bit by how that first week played out. What we know right now, let's start there, is Deshaun Watson has played the past 2 days, or practiced the past 2 days, didn't practice on Wednesday. So at that point, you're going, it's going to be another week, but he was out there at limited basis on Thursday. Kevin Stefanski said he did everything on Friday. Now they got to see how that throwing shoulder responds to all that activity and make a final determination. If you go all the way back to that first game he missed, which I believe was in week 4, Deshaun thought, everyone there, the coaches, the front office, everyone thought Deshaun Watson was playing. He showed up on Sunday morning. He could not throw the ball more than 10 yards, could not drive the football the way that he needed to go play in a football game. And so the decision was made to hold him out. I know that a lot was made of the Kevin Stefanski response when he was asked whether or not Deshaun Watson was medically cleared. And he says, yes, he was medically cleared, but, he made the decision that he was not able to go. And a lot of people took that as, well, Deshaun pulled himself off. Why didn't he gut it out for the team? In my mind, and again, educated guess territory here, Rich, I believe that Kevin Stefanski was surprised that anybody would ask if a player who's going through a pregame workout on Sunday has been medically cleared. In other words, if a player is not medically cleared, you don't work them out 2 hours before kickoff. You rule them out. They're not going to play in the game. So in Stefanski's mind, he's thinking, why would you even ask? Like, of course, he's medically cleared. Like the doctors say he could play, but he's got to be functional. He wasn't functional. And then the other piece of it was reported as a shoulder bruise, which, I've said this before, but I think people think of that terminology, that injury, as, well, you got up in the dark and you walked into a door frame and you got a little bruise on your shoulder. No, it's a rotator cuff issue. He referred to it as a micro strain, a strain, or micro tear. I referred to it as a rotator cuff contusion. It's all more or less the same thing. And functionally, when you have that type of injury on your rotator cuff, it makes it hard. You lose strength. You have some weakness in there. You have discomfort in there. Those are all symptoms that Deshaun Watson was feeling. We've seen some videos of him throwing just in individual drills. In that setting, it looks like he's doing okay. The real test is going to be, can he drive the football? Can he make the throws downfield? Is he in as little pain as possible at this point? And can he function normally? If he's not, then they're going to go with PJ Walker for another week. Good sign today. We'll see where we are come Sunday.
A few minutes left with Tom Pelissero here on this busy Friday. 1 year ago today, happy Christian McCaffrey anniversary trade to the 49ers. Tom, anything on the horizon of something in that vein? Obviously, McCaffrey was traded away from a team that had already blown out their head coach, and it was obvious to everyone there that they had turned the page to the following season. We haven't seen any of that yet. So there are unique circumstances to this trade that occurred 1 year ago today. What about the upcoming trade deadline? Any blockbuster you're sensing, feeling that you're willing to put out there right now in the ether?
I would say that based on all the GMs I've talked to, everyone gets the sense that things are a little bit slower right now than they've been in years past. My theory on that, just talking to people within the league, is in part a lot of the teams right now, Rich, that have bad records thought they were going to be good. Denver, right or wrong, Sean Payton said, I think we're a playoff team. The Vikings were in the playoffs. The Giants were in the playoffs. The Patriots were not a terrible team and definitely thought that they would be better. All those teams right now are 1 or 2 wins. And so you're in a challenging position because the trade deadline's so early. And there was discussion among the general manager's advisory committee actually last fall about, could you push it back a week or 2? There's always concern from the competition committee, if you push the trade deadline any further back, you're going to have teams that get further along and then you really tank. So it's early in part to guard against some of that behavior. But right now, for those teams that I just mentioned that are all bad record, but they thought they were going to be good, now you've got not just the football stakeholders, the head coach, the GM, but you also have owners who are trying to figure out and having conversations about, are we really going to be bad? Are we really going to take apart a team that 6 weeks ago we thought was going to be really good and start selling? Or do we double down, maybe even be a buyer, bring somebody in? The Panthers are another team on that list. They didn't anticipate being 0-6 right now, but just poking around on Carolina, yeah, there's some veteran players who potentially would be available, but they'd like to add players. They'd like to put some things around Bryce Young if they can, whether that's a receiver, whether that's getting some help on defense. They'd like to upgrade that roster. So it's a really unique type of a position. There's some teams like Arizona that, yeah, I think we all looked on paper and said 1-5 sounds about right. They've been very competent. They're playing really hard for Jonathan Gannon, but that's in a team that potentially could be taking calls on selling players. Denver certainly is open for business, but they're not just going to give away the entire roster, all of which, Rich, is a long way of saying we are currently, 11 days out, I believe, from the trade deadline. I thought this would be the week things really picked up. Right now, there's a lot of poking around. There's a lot of calls being made. There's not a lot that's advancing at this point. Let's see where we are after this week's games and even those final couple of days before the deadline, just because, again, some of the teams with bad records right now didn't think they were going to be bad, and they want to hold off on any decisions about blowing things up until as late as possible.
Yeah, I mean, that makes week 7 games that huge. They're huge in that regard. It might push teams towards more of a brink or more towards buying. And then the Cardinals, but I mean, if they're thinking of selling or taking calls to determine it, they put Kyler Murray and Budda Baker back on the practice field this week. And they're talking about how these guys might return. Like, is that possible? Tom, what do you think on that front?
I would be surprised if Kyler plays this week. Nobody's ruled it out yet, but that would surprise me. Just 3 days of practice. He has worked in with the first string offense, so not out of the question. With Budda Baker, not out of the question. He could be back either. You also have to ask yourself, if you're going to be a seller, and I'm not reporting anything, just saying if you're going to be a seller, guys like Budda Baker, maybe even Kyler Murray, are some of the guys who potentially have the most value as trade partners. So if you're able to at least show that they're back healthy in practice, maybe even get a guy like Budda into a game, what does that do to the potential trade market? These are all things that teams have to take into consideration. We've seen other teams in the past who hold guys out if they're dealing with any type of injury prior to the trade deadline. So keep an eye on some of those inactives over the next couple of weeks here too, Rich. It's going to be fascinating.
And what about Saquon? He basically said, I don't want to leave. Don't trade me. But that's, again, 1 year anniversary of McCaffrey being acquired. Look at what a difference it has made for San Francisco. Again, in this world, we work on NFL plus, everything's plus. They became Niners plus, you know what I mean, by that trade. Why can't the Bills become Bills plus by making one of those trades? Just as for instance, just throwing it out there. Let's take a team that is already really good and they get plussed up, like Von Miller allowed Buffalo to become Bills plus until he got hurt. Why not? Why not do one of those things?
Seem like the Ravens be another logical team that potentially after losing J.K. Dobbins, maybe there's a running back who helps put him over the top. Those are all things that are possible. With Saquon, he doesn't want to leave. He ultimately doesn't really control that. He's going to be a free agent after the season. This is the type of guy in the situation where if you're able to get value, historically, you would say, okay, that's a logical player who could get traded. I also know how the Giants organization, how ownership feels about Saquon Barkley. They want him to be there. You look at the contract. He signed that contract before the start of training camp on a 1-year deal that just had some incentives in it, which right now they're all tied to playoffs, so he's not going to hit any of them. He's basically just going to play for the tag number. He signed that because he thought the best thing he could do was go out there, have another big year, lead the team to some wins. Instead, he gets hurt, gets banged up. Circumstances change within the NFL. But you look at that upcoming schedule for the Giants, and they still got problems on their offensive line. Andrew Thomas is out again. Daniel Jones listed as questionable, but not yet cleared for contact. We'll see if he can make it for this week against the Commanders. But that schedule, Rich, you would have loved to steal that one in Buffalo. A game nobody thought that you would win with a backup quarterback. But even without that, get a couple of wins here prior to the deadline. You're not completely out of it. There's an extra wild card spot these days, 17-game season. Again, you can trick yourself into believing a lot of different things here. But, the reality is there really is opportunity. Everybody's going to have to make those decisions. And if the Giants still think that they're in it, I would anticipate Saquon Barkley still being a part of that team.
Tom, thanks again. Greatly appreciate it. So don't be surprised next time next week when you zoom in, I'll just start the interview by saying, it's your daddy. We could just do one of those. That is funny, man.
Pull that soundbite. Yep. We'll revive it on Sunday.
Tom, yes, on our show, Tom. Our show called NFL Game Day Morning. We'll see you then. That's Tom Pelissero right here on my show, The Rich Eisen Show. Catch The Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern for free.